Let's talk about Palestine, a small land with a huge impact on world history. It sits at the crossroads of Asia and Africa, on the eastern Mediterranean. For centuries, it's been a meeting point for empires and religions, home to Jerusalem, Bethlehem, and Hebron. Before the headlines and conflict, Palestine was a land of farmers, merchants and scholars, Palestinians, Muslims, Christians, and a small Jewish community. Their lives were rooted in this place, shaped by its culture and history. But everything changed in the 20th century. Promises were made and broken, foreign powers drew new borders, and people lost their homes and country. This isn't ancient history, the consequences are still felt today. To understand today's headlines, we need to rewind to when Palestine was part of a vast empire. Let's walk through how this land became the center of a global conflict. For 4 centuries, Palestine was under the rule of the vast and influential Ottoman Empire. This period saw the region governed as part of a larger, sprawling territory, with its own unique administrative structures and local governance adapting to Ottoman rule. Life during this era was largely local, deeply rooted in the rhythms of daily existence and centered around prominent cities like Jerusalem, a city of immense religious and cultural significance. Jaffa, a bustling port city serving as a vital gateway for trade and travel, and Nablus, a hub of commerce and agriculture nestled in the heartland. The population was predominantly composed of Palestinian Arabs, a diverse community encompassing both Muslim and Christian faiths, each contributing to the rich tapestry of Palestinian society. Alongside them existed a smaller yet historically significant Jewish community, maintaining its presence and traditions within the broader Palestinian landscape. However, in the late 1800s, a transformative new idea began to take root and spread throughout Europe. Zionism, a burgeoning political movement with the central aim of establishing a dedicated Jewish homeland in Palestine, fueled by a desire for self-determination and security. Driven by escalating persecution and discrimination in various parts of Europe, some European Jews began immigrating to Palestine, seeking refuge and a new beginning in what they considered their ancestral land. These early immigrants started buying land, often with the support of Zionist organizations, and establishing exclusive settlements, laying the foundations for a future Jewish state. For the local Palestinians, the arrival of these newcomers was a profound shock. They were witnessing the arrival of newcomers with a clear political goal, a vision that directly challenged their own connection to the land. Land acquisition by Zionist organizations often involved buying land from absentee landlords, resulting in the displacement of Palestinian tenant farmers who had cultivated the land for generations. As the dream of creating a safe haven for Jews began to materialize, it increasingly meant dispossession, hardship, and displacement for the indigenous Palestinian population. The late Ottoman era, while appearing calm and stable on the surface, was a period of simmering tensions and growing anxieties. Beneath the veneer of normalcy, the seeds of future conflict were being sown, nurtured by competing claims and diverging aspirations. The impending storm of World War I was about to shatter the existing order, irrevocably altering the political landscape of the region. The once mighty Ottoman Empire would soon collapse under the weight of war, its vast territories fragmented and its influence diminished. In the aftermath, Palestine's fate would be determined by new, ascendant powers, their decisions shaping the future of the land and its people. The British would soon seize control of Palestine, establishing a mandate that would have far-reaching consequences. They would make promises, enshrined in documents like the Balfour Declaration, that would fundamentally reshape the political and demographic landscape of the Middle East, setting the stage for decades of conflict. This is where the story accelerates, hurtling towards a future defined by competing national aspirations and unresolved grievances. The conclusion of World War I marked a significant turning point in the Middle East, bringing an end to the long-standing Ottoman rule over Palestine. The collapse of the Ottoman Empire created a power vacuum, setting the stage for new imperial ambitions and redrawing the map of the region. In the aftermath, Britain stepped in to assume control of Palestine under a mandate from the League of Nations. This mandate granted Britain administrative control over the territory, tasking them with preparing it for eventual self-governance. However, Britain's position was complicated by conflicting promises made to both Jews and Arabs during the war, a situation that would sow the seeds of future conflict. These promises, made in an attempt to garner support against the Ottoman Empire, would prove difficult to reconcile. In 1917, the Balfour Declaration, a letter from British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour to a leader of the British Jewish community, pledged support for the establishment of a Jewish national home in Palestine, a move that was celebrated by Zionists worldwide. This declaration became a cornerstone of Zionist aspirations. At the same time, the British also made assurances that the rights of the existing non-Jewish majority in Palestine would be protected. This delicate balancing act was fraught with challenges from the outset. But how could both promises be kept simultaneously? The inherent contradiction in these pledges would become a major source of tension and conflict in the years to come. Under British rule, Jewish immigration to Palestine soared, fueled by both Zionist ideals and the growing persecution of Jews in Europe. As a result, the Jewish population in Palestine experienced significant growth, rising from under 10% of the total population to approximately a third by 1947, dramatically altering the demographic landscape. Land purchases by Jewish organizations and individuals led to the displacement of many Palestinian farmers from their ancestral lands, exacerbating existing tensions. Palestinians witnessed their country undergoing rapid and profound changes as new settlements and infrastructure transformed the landscape. A new society, with its own institutions and culture, was forming alongside their own, creating a sense of displacement and alienation among the Palestinian population. In response, Palestinians engaged in various forms of resistance, including protests, organized political movements, and acts of revolt. The most significant of these was the Arab Revolt of 1936–39, a widespread uprising against British rule and increasing Jewish immigration. The British responded with force, ultimately crushing these uprisings through military intervention and suppression. The suppression of the Arab Revolt had a devastating impact on Palestinian society, weakening its leadership and leaving it vulnerable. Meanwhile, the Jewish community continued to build its own institutions, including self-defense militias like the Haganah, to protect themselves and advance their goals. These institutions were instrumental in preparing the Jewish community for eventual statehood, laying the groundwork for a future independent nation. By the end of the Mandate period, Britain had come to the realization that it was unable to resolve the increasingly complex and intractable crisis in Palestine. Exhausted and facing mounting pressure, Britain decided to relinquish its mandate and hand the problem over to the newly formed United Nations. The stage was now set for a major confrontation between the two communities, as tensions reached a boiling point and the prospect of open conflict loomed large. The fate of Palestine, and the future of its people, would now be decided by the international community, as the United Nations grappled with the challenge of finding a just and lasting solution. Everything was about to change, as Palestine stood at a critical crossroads, poised on the brink of a new and uncertain era. In 1947, Britain left and the UN proposed a partition plan: 2 states, one Arab and one Jewish. Jerusalem would be an international city. On paper it seemed fair, but the reality was stark. Jews were a third of the population, owned less than 7% of the land, but were given 56% of Palestine. The Arab state got less land, and the Jewish state would have a large Arab minority. The Jewish leadership accepted. Palestinians and the Arab world rejected it as unjust. The UN vote triggered immediate violence. Militias on both sides fought for territory. Zionist forces, better organized and armed, began seizing towns and villages, expanding beyond the UN's borders. For Palestinians, this was now a fight for survival. Homes and villages were at stake. The conflict was no longer political, it was existential. The war for Palestine had begun. As the British left, violence exploded into war. On May 14, 1948, Israel declared independence. The next day, Arab armies invaded. Israelis call it their War of Independence. Palestinians call it the Nakba, the catastrophe. Over 750,000 Palestinians, more than half the Arab population, were expelled or fled. This was not just chaos, it was a systematic campaign to empty Palestinian towns and villages. The Deir Yassin massacre spread terror, prompting more flight. Over 500 Palestinian villages were destroyed, their names erased, new Israeli towns built in their place. By 1949, Israel controlled 78% of historic Palestine, far more than the UN plan. The West Bank and Gaza fell under Jordanian and Egyptian control. The promised Palestinian state never appeared. Refugees crowded into camps, beginning a crisis that endures today. The Nakba is the root of the Palestinian refugee tragedy. For 19 years, Israel held most of Palestine. Palestinians lived as refugees or under Jordanian-Egyptian rule. In 1967, the Six-Day War changed everything. Israel seized the West Bank, East Jerusalem, Gaza, the Golan Heights, and Sinai. For the first time, all of historic Palestine was under Israeli control. For Israelis, it was a triumph. For Palestinians, a second catastrophe, the Nakba. Another 300,000 Palestinians were displaced. Those who remained in the West Bank and Gaza now lived under military occupation. Checkpoints, curfews, and land confiscations became daily life. UN Resolution 242 called for Israeli withdrawal, but it was never implemented. Instead, Israel began building settlements on occupied land, illegal under international law. The occupation that began in 1967 is the root of today's conflict. The map and lives were redrawn once again. After 1967, Israel built settlements across the West Bank and Gaza, carving up Palestinian land. Settlements grew into towns, connected by roads Palestinians couldn't use. Daily life became a maze of checkpoints and restrictions. By the 1980s, a generation knew only occupation. In 1987, the First Intifada erupted, a grassroots uprising of protests, strikes, and stone throwing. The world watched as children faced tanks, forcing global attention on the occupation. Israel responded with force, but the uprising made clear the status quo couldn't last. This led to the first real peace talks. Yet, settlement expansion never stopped. Each new house made a Palestinian state less likely. Settlements became the physical symbol of ongoing dispossession. The cycle of occupation, resistance, and settlement would define the decades ahead. The struggle for freedom continued. The First Intifada led to the Oslo Accords in 1993, a moment of hope. The PLO recognized Israel. Israel recognized the PLO. The Palestinian Authority was created with limited self-rule in parts of the West Bank and Gaza. The plan, 5 years of talks, then a final agreement on borders, refugees, settlements, and Jerusalem. For a moment, a two-state solution seemed possible. But settlement construction doubled in the 1990s, fragmenting Palestinian areas. Daily life for Palestinians barely improved. The occupation was repackaged, not ended. By 2000, peace talks collapsed. Ariel Sharon's visit to Al-Aqsa sparked the Second Intifada, far more violent than the first. Suicide bombings, military crackdowns, and a massive separation wall followed. The hope of Oslo gave way to despair. The dream of peace faded as the reality of occupation deepened. The conflict entered a new, more entrenched phase. Today, the story of Palestine is still unfolding, a narrative etched in resilience and resistance. It's a story that demands our attention, a story that continues to shape the region and the lives of millions. The two-state solution, once a beacon of hope, is now seen by many as a distant dream, a fantasy fading with each passing year. The complexities on the ground make any easy resolution seem increasingly unlikely. Over 700,000 Israeli settlers live in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, a demographic reality that further complicates the prospects for a lasting peace. These settlements are a major point of contention in the ongoing conflict. Palestinian territories are fragmented, surrounded by walls and checkpoints, with no real sovereignty, hindering movement and economic development. The physical barriers serve as a constant reminder of the restrictions placed upon the Palestinian people. For Palestinians, the Nakba never ended. It's an ongoing process, a lived reality that shapes their daily lives and aspirations. The trauma of displacement and loss continues to resonate through generations. It's seen in evictions in Jerusalem, demolished olive groves, and the blockade of Gaza, which has created a humanitarian crisis and severely restricted the movement of people and goods. Millions of refugees still live in camps, holding keys to homes they can't return to, symbols of a longing for a past and a hope for a future where they can reclaim their ancestral lands. This history gives context to every headline from the region, providing a deeper understanding of the complexities and nuances of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The conflict is not between equals, it's about a people living under occupation, facing systemic challenges and struggling for basic human rights. The story of Palestine is about justice, dignity, and the right to self-determination, a fundamental principle that underpins their struggle for freedom and independence. History isn't just in books, it's lived every day by those whose past is their present, shaping their identities and influencing their hopes for the future. The future remains uncertain, But the struggle for rights and recognition continues, fueled by a deep-seated desire for a just and lasting peace.